the room has now been laid out in a more conventional manner. In other words, I'm not to one side. That does, of course, mean that people will be seeing the back of people who are watching a public inquiry. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Louise Nurse, and I'm the planning inspector who's been appointed by the Secretary of State to determine appeal. I think there are any new faces, but if there are any new faces today, I was saying yesterday that if anybody wishes to speak, there is that opportunity. But if you do wish to speak, your evidence would be given great weight if you would be willing to accept evidence. Does anybody else wish to say anything today? Mr. Hencote been very helpfully speaking, but if anyone else would like to speak, that is possible. I have been keeping a running list of inquiry documents, which I've also the appellant's legal representative has also been keeping that list, so they do seem to be corresponding. On that list, Mr. Hencote, your statement to be submitted. It'd be very helpful if you could submit it today, to be honest, or later tonight, because barristers may need to reference it in their closings, and I certainly would like to see it as well, obviously. So if you could ensure that you do that, and liaise with Kilgannon, she's able to provide it, and then I'll get a copy of that. So thank you very much. Now, having been on the site this morning, now going to look at conditions. In my opening, I made clear that it doesn't actually mean that I've made my decision one way or the other, but it's always important that we go through the conditions to make sure that they are appropriate and meet. Okay. Right. Normally this is done in the round table position, so basically I go through things. Sorry, Mr. Chaplin.
Yeah, just a couple of procedural matters, if I may, one of which relates to conditions. The first of which is, you'll recall that there was a point raised yesterday about the alignment of the public right of way, and whether it was the public right of way that had been moved or whether it was the road that's been moved. I've asked Ms. Bishop to provide an overlay showing the definitive right of way to the north of the site, overlaid on the first edition ordnance survey map, and that extract will be here tomorrow, which shows that it precisely follows where the road was in the 1890s. So it's the road that's moved, not the footpath that's moved. So that should be with us tomorrow. Second thing is, point arising from the site visit in relation to fencing. You'll recall that a point was made by Mr. Jefferson yesterday that there had been an enforcement complaint in relation to fencing. There was an enforcement complaint made in relation to fencing. You'll recall where the right of...
I know exactly where it is.
Yeah. So there was a complaint in relation to three things, one of which was advertisement onto the main road, the second of which was the height of the hedge being in excess of 2 metres, and the third was the height of the wickerwork fencing that one sees next to the hedgerow and the fencing. That's the one that was raised yesterday, and it was suggested that that was not lawful or might be unlawful or was subject to an enforcement notice investigation. In fact, there was an enforcement notice. There was an enforcement investigation, and correspondence sent to my client dated the 21st of December, which intimates that the enforcement officer had looked at the fence, was satisfied that it was less than the 2 metre requirement immediately adjacent to the edge of the property, and was therefore permitted development, and that enforcement complaint had closed. So I've asked for copies of that letter to be brought. It also pointed out that there is no law against having a hedge higher than 2 metres, other than high hedges, but that's not a relevant issue. But it's a point that Mr. Shaw will refer to tomorrow, but we thought it's sensible to get that letter to you sooner rather than later. And then the third thing is this. In relation to conditions, we had another pass in relation to conditions, one of which was restructuring the order of the conditions so they more precisely met the format that the inspectorate now seeks. In other words, pre-commencement, construction, operational, etc. So we sought to reorder the conditions in that way. I think a copy was sent to Mr. Hall's team a while back, and we've been trying to get those printed, and as yet they haven't been printed. So I don't know if it might be sensible just to rise for a few minutes and get copies of those printed. We've also looked at some of the conditions as we go through to see whether or not they differ from the model conditions, and we suggested a few amendments. So those have been sent through, and I just wonder whether they're the best template to use as we're going through the conditions, because I think they're not to hand yet.
No, sorry, we asked the senior.
We've just got a printer if you want to go and get some.
I got them from our team. I didn't know that you hadn't got yours already. Sorry.
You see the electronically, it's really for the man of inspector, to be honest.
Yeah, I just don't want to feel as if I'm the only one out here.
Well, we've got copies. It's really
Particularly
clear.
as I asked for conditions to be sorted out yonks ago. But yes, could I have a copy of the conditions? If you've got a hard copy.
Could you just be really clear about which version that
It'd be version 3, because I've already had version 1, which read with a statement of common ground, version 2 on the 20th.
The latest version should be pretty obvious, because the second line of it says pre-commencement conditions as a subtitle.
Yeah, the last version I had, we said something like delete this completely.
No, this definitely is beyond that. So if the version that is about to be handed up by Mr. Corden has the words pre-commencement condition on, then that's the right one.
This was received at 1:59.
Yeah, right. No, that's apologies. That should be 73.
So that's I need this.
Yes.
What's it saying on
And that's saying 17 on there.
Has everyone had the opportunity to enough time to look at them?
We haven't.
We haven't looked at them.
Okay, well,
It's a reordering, with the exception of the ones that about 3 or 4 that we can point out as we go through. It's the same ones. It's just reordered.
I wouldn't mind just a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Just to go quick.
Yeah, so we seem to have a discrepancy between what's been printed maybe and what's been
Is it got-
circulated.
I'm going to
Junction
give
number
you
16. I think it's-
3 minutes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
just so we can sort it out.
And then we can come back. It's not that
What's
embarrassing, my age as well.
Established, because the version you've got electronically has the junction conditions number 17, whereas this has got the printout got number 16.
When I go to print preview it then
It's coming
becomes
to 16,
yeah.
right? It may be because there's a condition.
Do you-
Deleted it higher up.
Can take my laptop off if you want. But yeah, do you want to just?
16 is that.
Yeah. So I think that, and then the very last thing I added was so there were that is
That is the most up to date version.
So
Okay.
yes, the only changes I've made. I'll talk you through it. These where this looks like there's a whole new condition. It's just kind of copied and pasted
Moved it
later
further
and just
along,
moved it. I did reword the tree one, but just to make.
I think that's probably better being discussed. As
Yeah. But literally, I've done nothing to the substance, just because the wording was terrible. Oh, lovely. Thank you so much.
There's the other ones.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. It's really kind.
Shall I take one of those up to the inspector?
Yes, please.
And it was really helpful.
Can I take one of these over to Calvin to make sure
Take two of them.
Is that okay?
I told my son,
Okay. Well, if I leave that coffee with you. I'll take one.
So that's the right one, isn't it? I've got text on.
Yeah.
Use that one.
Thank you.
Have you put notes on it?
No, I haven't yet. I was just going
That's the letter to.
Yeah. Second letter.
Is it done?
If these left latest goes, you can.
I'm going to formally resume. Just to note, I've just been given the letter relating to sexual issues, and that will be ID7.
ID6.
No, ID6 was the revised provisions. Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
I'm going to go through these conditions. Okay. Conditions 1 to 3, you please know, are straightforward. Any comments on that? Condition number 4 talks about in general and talks about being carried out in general with the details shown on drawing number EP01, which is land use parameter plan and the building heights parameter plan. I thought that was more definitive than general and accordance.
Yeah, I think the word general should be deleted.
Thank you. Council?
Yeah, happy to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one more, isn't it?
5, you've referenced various documents, which I think you've made them slightly more specific. But in terms of page 25 of the planning statement, I think, again, that's updated 2022. Just want to have clarification because you've had so many iterations. I think it's very important that we're actually clear what it is. So can you just could somebody just double check so they can make it specific as possible?
Logically, madam, if all the other documents are dated, then that one should be as well.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, we're taking notes as we go through, and the intention will be then to discuss with Mr. Hall outside of inquiry, so that we can give you a revised version following these discussions. If that's acceptable.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Number 6 is uncontroversial. Number 9, the new number 9 is right at the back, wasn't it, originally? The new policy.
Yes.
Could you remind me what number it was? 13. Sorry?
13.
That's fine. Drainage. The development is occupied for. We're talking about any part of the development, aren't we? Just wondering whether that means nice. And the drainage obviously will be maintained and retained, won't it?
Yeah.
So could you?
Sorry, I think the sun's maintenance is going in the union.
Okay, well, it certainly needs retaining.
Retaining.
Yeah. But obviously this covers foul water as well, so
Yeah.
so retention needs to be included.
Thank you. Archaeology. Yeah, that's okay. Contamination. Condition 9. you talk about current guidance within criterion C. And I'm not particularly concerned with having this reference to something that may change. So that needs changing. And also the question is when these works are going to be actually take place, because in criteria A, say no development shall take place until this remediation strategy is taken, submitted and approved in writing.
Yeah.
But it seems to imply that the actual time issue only relates to criterion A, rather than all those criteria. So that needs changing. Everyone understanding where I'm coming from?
Yes, as a precursor to D, to make sure the works have been done before the site's occupied, is essentially the point. So it's bringing a time trigger into D, I think.
Yes, and also that this is the second number 9, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. Oh, that the numbers are being updated.
We'll renumber. I think it's just a matter of doing things in the last minute and moving things around. That number 9 has been slotted between 6 and 7, and for some reason Microsoft hasn't renumbered,
Right.
which may be a factor of the fact that Microsoft is currently down at the moment. There's been a there's been a bit of worldwide attack on Microsoft. So things like Outlook and things on the cloud are problematical today.
So, but we all know what we mean by number 9, don't we? It's great. Okay. New number 10. This has actually been changed since last read it. Okay. When you look at these tree issues, and then you have an horticulturist and all those types of policies, conditions. You've got an environmental condition number 19 as was, i.e. construction environmental management plan condition.
Yeah.
Doesn't that duplicate a lot of the things in those various conditions?
Yes, I also thought that all 3 could be one condition, but all 3 tree conditions could be do in accordance with the method statement.
I mean, it just seems to me you either have construction management plan, which is all encompassing, or you have various specific criteria relating to conditions. So could that be, does the council understand what I'm saying there? Because it seems to be duplication. Yes, you've got in the original number 19, you've got the construction environmental management plan condition. Okay. For example, details of protective measures, both physical and sensitive working practices to avoid impacts during construction. Okay. Then you have a whole lot of conditions about trees, which one assumes are environmental constraints that you're trying to protect.
Yes, understood, madam, and I don't see any reason why we can't just rationalise it so that there's not that duplication.
Thank you, because otherwise it gets very confusing for someone who's enforcing which condition they're actually enforcing it against. So, if you ensure that that's
I just wonder whether or not the intention is that the tree protection should take place at an earlier point. So I'm just looking at the trigger for the CEMP. So whether or not the intention is before anything happens, the trees are protected. Whereas paragraph condition 19 is a prelude to the submission of reserved matters.
Essentially, but then why wouldn't you want to check everything prior to commencement?
Oh no, I completely agree. I just wonder whether or not the reason for separating it out, I was sitting in Mr. Rich's place, it were, is that the intention is to make sure, absolutely sure, that the trees are protected from a very early stage, and that's why the council are concerned to have hard surfaces identified as where utilities to go and make sure protective fences are there, and then our horticulturist has done that. Whereas the CEMP essentially leaves it all up to a scheme as to when all that might happen. Whereas protecting the trees up front in specific ways thought to be particularly important, because obviously minor works can damage trees very significantly. I don't know, that may be the rationale. Certainly we would have no objection to combine the three conditions relating to trees into one, and then the CEMP essentially deals with everything else.
I think the derivation here is that we're using standard conditions for tree protection, where we don't always have a construction environmental management plan condition as well, but in this case we have both, and so there is the opportunity to wind the requirements into one condition if need be.
I mean, was it? Obviously, it would be nice to have all sorted before now. And if you are going to do it, or you are going to do it, can you also not talk about in accordance with British standards again? Because, you know, if you do that again, they can change, can't they? So it's quite standard.
Yeah.
On the basis that standards can change.
Yeah, yes, we're happy to work on that. I think the difference there is a slight difference between the two conditions, though, in that one requires the submission and approval of a plan, then the other one just provides certainty over the fact that certain measures have to be put in before development commences.
Yeah, I
as in
guess
the
I
tree
think Mr.
protection.
Tucker was saying that, and was exploring the nuances between the two slightly different issues. However, if you can consider both the tree issues and the CEMP and see that there isn't any over current standards.
Yes.
Thank you. I mean, the badges, certainly, I'm sure, fit in with the CNA, because that's only 6 weeks before commencement, isn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't actually seem, detail of that doesn't seem particularly effective, though. In other words, when measures will be implemented, etc. So making sure that you work out when actions are taken. Can we now look at the biodiversity net gain on that provision? 14. It talks about a CMP HEMP document. I see that's that. But in criteria 3, Roman numeral 3, details of species composition and abundance, and it talks about bracket percentage age within seed mix, etc. etc. doesn't really be precise.
It should be including percentage with seed mix,
Or just
or just that,
get
yes.
rid of the thing in parentheses, because you don't need that, do you?
Agreed.
When we were out on the site this morning, it became very clear that there's going to be quite a lot of changes to levels. So construction works hereby approved are commenced. I'm wondering whether it'd be appropriate to put engineering works in that. Leading linked to
Yes.
I've changed that trigger, I think, on my version to no development should take place. That should encompass engineering and the other one.
But we could certainly have in
But, yeah.
brackets no developments, including level changes.
yes, I think that'd be
That's
I'd be happy with that. One concept. Cute. $16 on sorry, I'll go on. Can I go on 16, the old 16,
Yes.
which is the update survey conditions? On the basis that the whole point of this is that you have an ecological impact assessment to check that things haven't changed. Should it be prior to commencement of development and any subsequent phases?
So prior to commencement of development and prior to each phase of development.
Yes, because I think that's what the purpose of that condition
Yes.
is. Mr. Paul, understand where I'm coming from on that?
Do we also therefore need a plan to approve phases? Talking about each phase of development. What are the phases of the development?
I think logically, yes, if we're to have internal phases, I'm pretty sure that our intention will be that it's all a single development, but conceivably somebody could come forward and develop in phases. So maybe discharging that condition is simply, it's all going to be built in a single phase. But if that's the case, then that would then bite in relation to condition 16 as a single assessment. But if somebody else comes along and does it in phases, then I'm sure we could add a phasing condition to that effect. I mean, theoretically, you could do it that way. I think you were told on site matter, for example, the winery, there's only part of it that's been constructed as consent for other aspects of it. So something that might have been envisaged at the time of consent being a single phase might come forward in a number of phases. So I think Mr. Hall's right. So phasing conditions not a bad idea. Or in phases, yes.
Junction. I'll go on to landscaping plan condition. We talked about landscape, looking at condition 17A. Conservation of wildlife habitat conditions, ecological enhancements of the following specification of section 5 of the ecological impact assessment. Is that the ecological impact assessment that's going to be submitted in 16 or not?
Madam, I think that on the basis that it refers to section 5, we wouldn't know what section 5 would be on the plan to be submitted, then it will refer to the one that has already been submitted.
Yes, so then that means stating and need to clarify what it is. Kind of referencing exactly what.
Yes.
Probably needs a retention and maintenance element to it as well.
Yeah, we're agreed, madam, that a retention requirement is beneficial as well.
And maintenance.
Yeah.
We agree.
Following and taking notes, because I have great faith that you're going to provide me with this wonderful new set of conditions.
I think you have at least three of us on this side taking notes. I'm sure we've got others on the other side taking notes as well.
Okay, lighting plan condition 18. Again, you've got this EG, for example. The third line down in the middle, EG batten bird boxes, trees and hedgerows. Do you need to specify what those are as examples? I mean, they're either what you want or the things that there should be there. You know, it rather implies that there are other things that could be in that.
I'm struggling to see what else might be sensitive features other than bat and bird boxes, trees and hedgerows.
Well, then get rid of the EG.
In which case that then leaves it open to the authority to be able to determine whether or not there are other features that we're not aware of sitting in this room.
Well, then just put a full stop.
Exactly.
It's one or t'other, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not. And also there's reference to the Bat Conservation Trust guidance note 08/18 bats and artificial lighting in the UK.
And that's, it sounds, madam, I've read this as being an external lighting plan. So it's not dealing with light spill from internal windows. I assume that that's the intention. But it might be worth making that clear.
But you think not go around the place making old people draw their curtains.
Well, having conditions telling people to draw their curtains quite.
That'd be difficult to enforce.
Well, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, the intention, madam, is for it to be external lighting control.
Yeah, okay, well, then, it might be made explicit.
But it might include things such as motion sensitive security lighting on houses.
Yeah, because that's something that people may want to provide.
Exactly.
Thank you. We've looked at the construction environmental management plan conditions, haven't we? The similar things actually in G, like pollution prevention measures to the enumeration bit are specified in section 5 of the ecological impact assessment. I'm assuming this is the ecological impact assessment that accompanies the application.
So date again.
Yeah, so that again needs clarifying. 20. All dwellings at site that are specifically designed for older people or those with disabilities or special needs shall be built to the MR3 wheelchair standard within the building regulations. I may be wrong, but I thought all dwellings on the site were for older people.
Sorry, madam. 20 This is the old 20.
Yeah, the old
Yeah,
one.
yeah. We've got a new 20 as well, which is put away.
Yeah, I know, but I'm going through the old
Right.
Sorry.
thing because that's what I've written all my notes on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So can we delete reference to that specifically designed for older people? Because you're not going to be building any other dwellings on the site, are you, by virtue of this application? If it was to be granted. Construction hours, don't need that because you've got a construction management plan. Correct? Everyone agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. 22, this might be worth putting in about engineering works. Particularly engineering work for site levels.
Yeah.
Suggested for that one. In terms of waste reduction, is there any specific element of this construction management plan that references waste reduction on site? Talk about how you deal with the waste, but it doesn't actually talk about how you're going to reduce the waste.
No, but logically it should.
Assume you've got a minerals and waste.
Yes, we have, yes. Yeah.
%100%.
Parking and allocation. Seems to be similar to your 24. Forgive me if you've already changed this, but 24 and 29 seems to replicate each other. And also, given that building regs have changed and all sites need, well, electric vehicle charging points is part of building regs. Was there any need to have a condition relating to electric vehicles? Charging.
The honest answer is for the care home. I don't know to what extent there would be a requirement in terms of building regs. I think we need to check that. For the individual units of accommodation, you're right, they would be covered and there wouldn't be a need for charging points. But for the care home, I don't know is the honest answer.
It's some kind, it would be, I'm sure building regs, your building regs need done for commercial premises, haven't they?
Yes, they have, but that's what I genuinely don't know to what extent it would require a specific number of EV charging points. But for example, one wouldn't want the minibuses to be taking up the only EV charging points if potentially members of staff had electric vehicles. So it may be that it's worthwhile keeping it open on the basis of condition 27 to provide a scheme to be agreed. Sorry, 29 as was.
What's the council bill? We're also not supposed to duplicate regulations.
No.
Madam, we were saying we'd probably check with building regs, and we save any duplication if it's already covered under the building regulations.
Yeah, can you check that as a matter of urgency? I would like these all done.
Yeah. the one thing that may not be covered for under building regs, just looking at it again, is the points of passive provision for the integration of future charging points. Because building regs will require certain numbers of charging points, but may not require passive protection for future charging points. So I don't know if that may be part of the thesis behind the condition. I don't know.
I think it's building regs are surprisingly detailed and generous in terms of EV works. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't want to put in lots of key points. It's get it working out. So you've removed the travel plan. Is that correct? 27 has been removed.
Yes. And that's just simply because it duplicates the obligation for the benefit of those in the audience.
See junction.
It's been moved.
What number?
It's been moved to condition 16, new condition 16.
Okay, that junction on, you have to be retained. There's no retention clause there.
No, but you're quite right. I think there's a typo in the first line as well.
Yeah. Road footways and accesses, that means maintaining.
Yes.
That's the only comments I have on the conditions that was submitted.
I just wondered, madam, on the infrastructure phasing plan,
Yeah.
whether that could be used to expand it to be a more general phasing plan, including infrastructure, and then that covers the point we talked about earlier on.
Yeah. Actually, thanks for bringing that one to my attention. Because you've got variations. This are first agreed. Right about the local planning authority. I assume that's just a question of timing, is of the works rather than anything else.
That's right. It's been moved so that it's in the section dealing with what has to be submitted at the time of reserve matters.
Yeah. So I think I want to be explicit though that work should be delivered in accordance with the approved phasing plan.
Yeah.
But the variations only relates to the timing of the phasing plan rather than what actually happens. That makes sense.
Yes.
Does the council have any?
Yeah, I think we've deleted that in the new version of 22, madam, so that there is no longer a tail piece on 22.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's gone.
Okay. I note that there's a discussion point. In relation to ground levels. That's really kind of the reserve matter thing, isn't it? About where the ground floor buildings are going to be.
Yes.
my concern really was that you would have a clear, before you even put in your reserve matters, there was a clear understanding of what were, so that when you put in your reserve matter scheme, everyone was clear what we were talking about in terms of level of the building.
Yeah, so that condition just deals with finished floor levels of built form. Your point is a wider one, as I understand it, and I think it's a good one, i.e. that there will be ground level changes, for example, to create routes through that are accessible.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's all ground level changes, not just finished floor levels, although I think it's probably sensible to have that in any event. To have finished floor levels to be approved at the time of reserve matter in any event.
Yeah, but I think it's, as I say, I just wanted it to be crystal clear for anybody dealing with any reserve matters application to come forward.
All changes
You know,
in
where
level.
they are, and particularly in terms of the whole issue of the appearance of the site, where it is, and because when we went out on site this morning, there was discussion about, not there was actually on site, obviously, but there was the, you know, the flat area we were told that quite a lot of the land would be moved.
Yes. No, you're right, and it's a fair point that we need a condition which deals with all level changes, not just the build form. So we'd have the two, and that would go in prior to construction in relation to all level changes, and in relation to finished floor levels, that would go in at the reserve matters application. The other one, madam, we can bring you up to date. You'll see that building height. We've obviously got parameters plans as to where you have story heights, but that's not identified what that means in practice, because one could have very tall or very short rooms. We've taken instructions on that behind the scenes, and we'll discuss it with the council as to what we think is appropriate. We did muse about whether or not just to have story heights in, but we think that's uncertain. It's appropriate to have heights above ground level, so actual meterages. So that's a matter that we'll discuss behind the scenes.
The intention, Madam, was to have a building height for single story, 1.5 story, 2 story, 3 story, etc.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in terms of transparency there.
Yes. Oh no, we'd happily. This would go back onto the council's website once we redrafted that element. And I think Mr. Shaw can identify what the heights are.
Well, we've got the heights that have just come through from the architects in the last half an hour or so. I can run through them now, or we can discuss them with the authority and put them in a revised version that we send to you.
I prefer it if it could be,
Yeah.
if they could be discussed.
Yes, okay, we'll do that.
So
That's four.
just tell me what they are.
Oh,
Yeah.
An invitation to speak, Mr. Shaw.
I'm going to have to look at my.
I think we held off speaking because it's a really long list.
It's not an easy list, actually.
Yeah.
It needs a bit of refinement, I think. But
Well, should we have an adjournment and then we can come back and look at it? I think that's easy.
I think 5 minutes between us and the local authority would be quite useful, actually. Then we can.
Well, perhaps I mean, it might be useful if you make it 15 minutes and you could perhaps put them off,
Yes,
and then
Okay.
Everyone would be able to see them.
I agree.
I
Okay.
think that would be the easiest way of doing things and most transparent.
And then the intention would be, so obviously we've now come to the end of the discussion, subject to coming back after the break, would be for Mr. Hall and Mr. Shaw to put their respective heads together before the close of play, as it were. So after you've risen this afternoon, madam, and that hopefully we would therefore have a replacement of this list by tomorrow morning.
Yes. I wouldn't need to discuss it again.
No.
But I would like it obviously to be provided.
Agreed.
Okay, so on that basis, I'm going to adjourn the inquiry until 20.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's now 20 I'd like to. I did ask that, the stickers could be printed up, that's not possible. I see.
Mr. Shaw.
We've got the figures. We've got the figures, madam, and we can read them out to you, and we just need to put a note together. But what Mr. Hall and I would then like to do is do a double check to make sure that these fit with the LVIA in terms of what has been assessed.
That they're not put forward in a user-friendly way, I think.
I'm afraid what we've had from the architects is not straightforward. And shall I talk you through what we're proposing?
Before you do that, Mr. Hencote, tried to approach me, break, and I rebuffed him in the traditional inspectorial way. So what did you want to say, Mr.?
What I wanted to say was just an observation based on the discussions that we had about the different conditions earlier, about the lighting plan. In general, when you said you didn't like it was like in accordance with, etc., totally agree with that. I think you need to be specific. But I think it'd be helpful for the lighting plan to be as specific as possible and mention display intensity and intermittency for security lighting, angles, that sort of thing. And I think, I mean, the specific list of things that you want to avoid or protect is helpful rather than unhelpful, like fat boxes or whatever it is. So I would have thought that it'd be useful to have a more specific lighting plan rather than more general language that appear to be emerging. Waste, I agree.
Sorry, I think the reason for that, Mr. Jeffcott, is so that if you have a plan which is then agreed by the local planning authority, they can work out what the specific thing should be in it, rather than having a list of things now which may not actually in the future necessarily be all the things that the lighting plan is required to protect or consider. That's a general reason for.
Yeah, okay, yeah. It just using display and intensity as a concept. I suppose you're saying that display and intensity is inherent in any lighting plan, but I want to make sure that we use. I totally agree with the point made about waste minimisation rather than just how to deal with the waste, but put in there. I think that's very sound. In terms of trees, that there needs to be specific protection to trees and to the.
I think that's what.
Well, I can accept that there is a way of dealing with that. And I would certainly welcome the most specific printout, and ideally on a map of the different heights that are being talked about for the buildings. Because what struck me this morning was that you didn't seem to be using the plan with notional buildings with heights that was circulated at an earlier stage. You had a more generic diagram you were looking at while we were walking around in terms of heights. I think a specific plan with the heights that are proposed would be very useful to know exactly what you're proposing.
Well, the parameters plan, the building height plan
on the list
related to stories, and that's why they are going to work out what the stories are. The LVIA, and this is exactly why the discussion was to talk about reflecting it to the LVIA. I mean, obviously, I've looked at the LVIA, but in terms of the parameters, that's why I ran out with the building plan. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor.
Madam, the heights that we've got are as follows: single story 4.6 metres.
4.6 stories.
Yeah, 1.5 stories, so one plus room in the roof. 1.5 stories,
So
6.1 metres.
So this is above adjacent ground level.
Above adjacent ground levels, yes.
Just give me those again.
4.6 for single story.
1.5.
For 1.5 stories, 6.1 metres. 2 stories, 8 metres. 2 stories plus room and roof, 9.5. This is all for the close care and extra care units,
Yeah.
madam. And we don't need to go any higher than that because we haven't got full 3 stories any longer. Scheme. For the nursing home, which, as you'll recall, is up to 4 stories, that 4-story would be the equivalent of 4.5 metres.
14.
I'm sorry, 4, did I say?
You did say 4.5.
It's very,
Japanese style.
just checking that Mr. Hall was listening. 14.5. And the amenities building, 12.65. But you'll appreciate all that these are up to those because the amenity building obviously steps across and that's the highest point.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, also it's up, yes, it's up to, and that's the whole point of it being an outline, isn't it?
Indeed.
Is that
Indeed.
there is potential for changes therein, but it's the threshold.
Yeah. Mr. Jeffcott is absolutely right. There is a drawing in the design access statement which shows how this configuration varies across blocks of buildings where they start at 2 metres and go up to, 2 stories and go up to 2.5 or 3. So I think with that overall cap and upper limit and the design access statement, it's pretty clear.
Thank you very much. If you could, I don't necessarily think that we need a note, but I do think you let Mr. Transparent in.
Yeah, I think the building heights condition needs specification of those story heights.
Yeah.
Above adjacent ground level, yes.
Then because you worked out what the adjacent ground level is condition,
Yes.
then everyone will know if the
Yeah. The two
hill is allowed.
the 2
What
conditions.
action might need to be taken place.
Can I ask one more question about the planned buildings? Is it, you mentioned earlier that there's quite a lot of removal of the ground that is envisaged in the plans. Are all the buildings going to have the ground around them level all the way round, all 4 sides? Or will some of them be built into the hillside so that the ground level on one side is different to the other?
The idea is that some of it's going to be built into the hillside.
Yeah.
So it's not level all the way round.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah, I
necessarily.
mean, that's not really necessarily relevant to this particular session, but that is my understanding.
That's absolutely right. That's what Ms. Bishop said.
Especially for other residents, that they're concerned about the hill becoming a series of steps.
No, it's as Ms. Bishop said yesterday, ma'am. You're correct.
Okay.
On that basis, I believe that there's nothing more to discuss on the conditions. Unless anyone that's either drafted possibly that I've been thinking about. Should clarify anything.
No, safe to intimate that with Mr. Hall's permission, he and Mr. Shaw can spend the next hour working through those amendments. That's acceptable to Mr. Hall.
Absolutely, for them to do it then. Yeah, I want them to do it.
I agree.
Very much so. In terms, Mr. Jeffcott, I'm still excited about your statement and I still haven't received it, so
I'll have to
I would like to.
transcribe.
Thank you. Marjorie?
In terms of the document sequencing, madam, the revised planning conditions have gone on as ID6. Would you want a subsequent ID number allocated to the
Please,
version
yes.
that's yet to follow?
I want to have all of them very clear which
Okay,
version is which.
so we'll give it a new ID
Yes,
document
that'll
number
be
when
right.
it's arrives. Okay.
Yes, and I could obviously put some to me.
Yeah.
Tucker, you look like you want to say something.
Yes. We've also redrafted the unilateral undertaking to take account of the discussions that took place yesterday. You'll appreciate that Mr. Richards is indisposed this afternoon, but on the assumption that he would have an opportunity to have a look at it overnight and discuss with his team first thing tomorrow. Hopefully, we'll be in a situation to be able to provide you with an amended version. Hopefully, first thing tomorrow, but certainly during the course of tomorrow. But we've essentially taken on board the points that were discussed yesterday. So that's the reason for not handing you that version in this afternoon. I think it's fair to Mr. Richards for him to have sight of it before it goes to you, Monday. That's acceptable.
All right. So tomorrow, we will start at 10 a.m. And we're going to have 2 sessions on housing need. In other words, the need for older persons accommodation. The council and the appellant have put forward a revised statement of common ground relating to housing need. So it's important that I'm able to consider that and ask questions relating to that. There'll also be a session on planning, which is fundamentally weighing the balance of the scheme, which again is a discussion where I'll be able to ask questions of both witnesses, the council and the appellant's witnesses. After that, they will have a discussion national undertaking, and both barristers will put forward their closings. Before I formally close it, I would very much like to have all documents received, because I don't expect to receive anything following the close of the inquiry, although I understand that the appellants will have difficulties signing the unilateral undertaking due to ownership constraints in relation to the mortgage person who owns the land.
Yeah, the mortgage.
Yeah. Okay, so on that basis,
Madam, can I just ask one question with regards to procedure for tomorrow?
Yeah.
Obviously, given the evidential position of yesterday, we anticipated that something similar would take place in relation to need. Was your intention to essentially have Mr. Corden on, say, that table, and Mr. Newton-Taylor and Mr. Donna on this table, and that the questions would be asked generally, or would it be intended that we would essentially bring them up one at a time to ask questions after they've made a few comments about their position? I wasn't entirely sure what your intention was.
I think to me the most helpful thing would be if both would perhaps briefly go over their respective positions, but sat together.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be one person saying something, another person saying, and then I can ask questions
To the ensemble.
to them both. Yeah.
Oh,
So that I can try and extricate what the agreed position is, and I've got some sort of general questions I want to ask. I was going to ask anyway.
So in terms of where you would want them, do you want the room laid out differently? Was my
I'm just
question.
sitting there. I'm sure they can both cozy up.
So Mr. Donald and Mr. Newton-Taylor.
There are 3 of them.
Obviously, there's Mr. Corden as well from the council's perspective.
Yeah.
Who there's the difference between them on. Sorry, there's a difference between them on need. So I just wonder whether I'm thinking out loud here, really, whether or not we might have Mr. Donner and Mr. Newton-Taylor here. They each, and Mr. Corden on that side, they each express what their respective views are in the same way that we did it yesterday. And then you ask the question, and then they each take it in turns, as it were, to respond. I don't know if that's what you're anticipating, or whether they would come forward one at a time.
On the basis that they're all agreed, I think if both, the fundamental issue is that the council and the appellant are agreed that need is not something that I should be worrying
Correct.
about. Obviously, I have to work out whether I agree with that principle.
Yes.
Therefore, if all 3 witnesses give a very brief overview of what their position is in terms of need, and I can have a discussion with all of them, I think, at the same time, because some questions, there's no point me saying asking all the questions to one witness and then chuntering off, and then I get another witness. Why not just have them all 3 there, and hopefully it will become clear, and it may be that one pipes up and says, oh, that's because of X, Y, and Z or something.
I think that may be sensible. So on that basis, what we'll do is we might switch it from the semicircular table to a square table, as it were, and get Mr. Newton-Taylor and Mr. Donner on this side and Mr. Corden on that side, and then you can ask them each to give their brief overview, and then they ask the questions of them, and they can each pike up as they wish.
I mean, I just want to work out questions, answers to my questions.
Well, that's understood, and presumably the same in relation to Mr. Hall and Mr. Shaw, as it were.
Yes.
I'll convey that to Mr. Richards as well, because I know he was keen to know. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. It is now. It's now 3:35, and I'd like to adjourn the inquiry until 10 a.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.